Hello, this is my 2012 Honda NC700X. Today we're going to do a quick walk around, go for a ride, and ultimately answer the question, is the Honda NC700X a used motorcycle bargain? Let's get started. This is a 2012 Honda NC700X with approximately 20,000 miles on it. In 2012, these bikes sold for roughly $7,000, which, adjusted for inflation in 2024 terms, is $9,500, believe it or not. One of the unique things about this bike is the configuration of the engine. So it's a parallel twin 670cc, nothing too crazy yet, single overhead cam, liquid cooled, but it's mounted, as you can see here, almost at a parallel with the ground, which you don't see commonly in a lot of vehicles. One of the reasons Honda decided to mount the engine this way is to keep the center of gravity low on this machine, to improve handling, to improve maneuverability, especially for beginner riders. This 670cc engine produces 51 horsepower and 45.7 foot-pounds of torque at about 4,750 RPM. The red line on this bike is a rather low 6,700 RPM. So of course these aren't the most impressive numbers, but this is no race machine. Definitely a commuter in an ADV body. Unlike some of Honda's other small adventure machines, this makes most of its power at a relatively low RPM. So say versus a CB500, which on paper only makes a little less horsepower than this machine does, the NC700 is a much better machine on the highway. Feels more powerful, it's a little heavier, it's more planted. Certainly the machine I would choose for any sort of highway riding. The bore in this engine is 73 millimeters, the stroke is 80 millimeters, so it is under square just slightly. Compression is 10.7 to 1, and obviously this is a fuel-injected motorcycle. Generally, these stats suggest that the engine should be fairly reliable, or at least not very stressed, which is a good thing when you're looking for a commuter bike. The other excellent thing about this engine is its impressive fuel economy. It's rated at 64 miles per gallon, and that is not just the manufacturer's aspirational marketing number. That's true. I've managed to get roughly 70 in a mix of city and highway riding. Moving to the other side of the bike, we can see the exhaust. This is the stock exhaust that the bike came with. No modifications. One of the nice things about this exhaust, at least for commuting riding in the city, is it's quite low noise, a lot quieter than a lot of other motorcycles on the road. Your neighbors will thank you for that. These bikes came with two transmission options. This here is the 6-speed manual with manual clutch. The other option for this motorcycle was a dual clutch transmission. I believe this was one of the first motorcycles Honda used their new dual clutch transmission on. I don't have any thing to say about the dual clutch transmission. I'm not an automatic motorcycle person, so I chose the manual, and I suggest if you are more of a traditional motorcycle rider, you go with the manual as well. Turning to the brakes. Front brake on this machine is just a single disc. It's 11.7 inches. Not super impressive. A lot of bikes in this class, you would see a brake disc on either side of the front tire. This machine, however, only has a single brake disc. And you can feel that on the road. This machine certainly does not stop as well as some of its competitors. Braking distances are a little longer. Just doesn't feel as confidence-inspiring as some other brake setups in this class. Looking at the rear brake, we have 9.4 inches diameter. Nothing too out of the ordinary here. This bike does not have anti-lock braking. I believe in 2012 anti-lock braking only came on the DCT model. This is the manual, so there's no anti-lock braking here. Front suspension is a telescopic fork with 6 inches of travel. There is no adjustment on the front suspension. Rear suspension, however, does have adjustable fork preload. This is a twin-sided swing arm. The rear suspension travel is 5.9 inches. One of the things that I do not like about this machine is its poor off-road performance. The suspension is simply too soft. There's not enough ground clearance. The bike's, a little heavy to go down any sort of single trails. It's not an adventure machine, despite how it may look. This bike is fully a commuter in an ADV body. I even swapped out these tires to something just a little more aggressive than what came on at stock. These are some sort of trail tire. I believe it's an 80/20 tire, so not super aggressive. Good enough for dirt roads, that sort of thing. I wouldn't take this bike down anything rougher than that. The wet weight on this machine is listed at 472 pounds. As you can see, this bike has quite a bit of additional storage on it. One of the excellent things about this bike is just how much you can put in it and on it, and it will get you where you're going. Fuel capacity. The fuel tank is actually underneath the passenger seat here. So if we take the key, turn to the left, that opens the passenger seat, and you can see there's a small fuel tank back here. Fuel tank is only 3.7 gallons on this machine, which is a bit small for this class. For example, a V-Strom 650 has over 5 gallons of fuel, but when you consider the impressive fuel economy this machine gets, you really end up with roughly the same range. One of the unique things about this machine is the front trunk. Turn the key to the right, it opens the trunk here. Where on a more traditional bike, you would have a fuel tank, and as you can see, there's quite a large storage area. This is an HJC large helmet. It's tight, but it certainly fits and it works. Okay, here we go. Let's start with a little background about this specific bike. I purchased this bike in 2021 for $3,600. It had 16,000 miles at the time, and it had spent most of its life in Florida. Unfortunately, many of the plastics on this bike are sun-faded or otherwise damaged, so I imagine it spent a lot of time in the Florida sun. I try to follow the market price of all the vehicles I own on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, eBay, etc. And I've noticed that with some patience, you can pick up bikes in similar condition to this, NC700s in similar condition to this, for around $3,000 if you're patient. The cockpit of the NC700X isn't particularly special. With a 32.7-inch seat height, I do feel like I can see over most cars, and I feel like most drivers can see me fairly easily. I have enough road presence that I feel comfortable in traffic, and here in Washington, D.C., we certainly get a lot of traffic. Of course, if you're shorter than maybe 5'7", the seat height might be a con. For reference, I'm about 5'11", and I can flat foot, but just barely. The digital display is clear, it's easy to read, even in direct sunlight. It has all the information you want out of a bike. It has your speedometer, your tachometer, your fuel gauge, etc. There is no temperature gauge, however, most new bikes have seemed to done away with the temperature gauge, but you of course do have a red indicator light if the bike is overheating. The seating position on this bike is simply not comfortable for long trips. The seat seems to lean forward oddly, which constantly pushes your butt up towards the narrow part of the seat against where the tank would be, except of course it's a frunk. The seat's also fairly hard. On long rides, I add an inflatable seat cover, and that seems to help quite a bit, but it is a shame that Honda couldn't simply design the seat better in the first place. Here on the city streets, the NC700X has more than enough power. I can get away from traffic easily. I can do double the speed limit in just a couple of seconds. I never feel like I'm missing out on any power on the city streets. The engine is quite smooth. Low revving, of course, means relatively low vibration. Torque picks up around the 2300 RPM mark, and the bike is still reasonably smooth all the way through to 6000 RPM. Around other motorcycles, you realize and appreciate just how quiet, refined, steady the NC700X is. I know not everyone appreciates a quiet exhaust, but I find that the quiet exhaust really helps with rider fatigue on long trips. The handlebar controls are typical Honda. One thing they threw in on this bike that not all their bikes have is hazard lights, hazard indicators. That's a nice touch. There are no high beam flashers. Of course, you can flip the switch back up and down yourself, but there is no button for your index finger on your left hand as you typically see in European motorcycles. Handling on the NC700X is pretty decent. I actually prefer the NC700X handling to the V-Strom 650 in the corners. It just seems better balanced. It has a better lean angle. For some reason, the V-Strom seems to have foot pegs that just stick out too far, and you can't take a corner sharp without scraping them. But I haven't had that problem on my NC700X. Wanted to make sure I included some highway riding in this video because that's something that a lot of people like to do with their motorcycles. Here in DC, our highways are often congested and slow moving, but I have done some multi-hour highway touring on this bike, and it has no issue maintaining 80 miles an hour all day long. I will say once you get above 90, the handling dynamics, the wind, the bike just simply is not comfortable at those speeds, at least not for a long period of time. If you live, down in Texas where you have an 85 mile an hour highway speed limit, this might not be the bike for you, but I think for the majority of highway touring in the U.S., the NC700, it does just fine. It's got enough power to get you out of trouble if you need to get out of trouble. It's great fuel economy. Really not a bad touring machine. Of course, once you get by the seating position and all of that. I should say the stock windshield on this bike is not at all meant for highway riding. You're looking at the stock windshield here. I had an aftermarket windshield that I use for highway touring, but unfortunately broke on me. This windshield, stock windshield, seems to throw air and buffeting right in your face. So that's something that you will want to upgrade, or you'll want to make sure has already been upgraded if you intend to do highway riding on the NC700X. I have a couple of other little qualms with the NC700X. For one, the fit and finish simply isn't as nice as I think Honda could have done. The plastic on the bike has not aged well, and it tends to rattle around with the wind and with the bike. Some of this might just be specific to my Florida bike, but also, the retainers, at least in the 2012 model, just don't seem to work that well. I've noticed that newer Honda bikes, like my 2021 Trail 125, use much improved, much sturdier retainers to hold the plastics together. Another thing, as I mentioned, the NC700X, it handles reasonably well for what it is, but it certainly isn't best in class. But for example, I had a BMW F-Series bike that certainly outhandles the NC700 in the twisties. But of course, you know, it's not at the bottom of the class either. It does better than a V-Strom does. It's not bad handling, but it's always nice to have a better handling machine. This gets me to possibly the biggest issue people have with this bike, and that's simply that the bike is not all that exciting. It doesn't get your heart pumping when you look on it, or even when you get in the saddle. It's simply too refined to offer the character that a lot of motorcyclists like. Another thing is, you know, the looks, it's subjective. I don't think it's a particularly good looking machine. I think it has too much plastic, and it shares too many styling marks with the Integra scooter. So if you're not familiar, at least in Europe, there was a scooter based on the same engine, same design, called the Integra. And I think you can kind of see and feel some of those scooter elements in this machine. So I guess this brings me to the ultimate question. Is the NC700X a used motorcycle bargain? Well, whenever it comes to purchasing a used bike, price seems to be the most important factor. Many of the bikes that fall into this $3,000 range are a lot older or a lot smaller than the NC700X is. With the NC700X, you're getting a modern bike that's a great commuter and can also handle highway riding. It's simply an excellent all-around machine. Another big consideration is reliability. The drivetrain on the NC700X is bulletproof. From my research, there are 0 commonly reported mechanical issues with this bike. It just works. If you do some research online, you'll find that many people take their NC700Xs over 100,000 miles with nothing but scheduled maintenance. That's certainly not the case with all bikes. So yes, I do think the NC700X is a used motorcycle bargain. If you're in the market for an NC700X, there's just a few things I suggest considering. First of all, just pay attention to the conditions of the plastics. It's not a big deal, but they can be quite annoying to fix. Really, other than that, just check it over like any other motorcycle before you purchase. Brakes, tires, chain, etc. As long as the bike has been reasonably maintained, you can be pretty sure that it'll last for years to come. Safe riding, and thanks for watching.